Hey, Bruchim Abayim, all those that are here, and the many that are joining us virtually. We have a distinct kavod to teach with us the next segment of Hilchos, Taharas Hamishpacha, the review. We have Rabbi Pesach Schmerling, Erstens a Shliach of the Rabbi in Far Rockaway. Shliach that first calling Yanav is Hafat Samayanis in that area, spreading Chassidus. And as a Batemacher, he takes the special schus of establishing many heiser from a Chassidish heiser and laying down the foundations. And now we're giving people a second chance, a second lease on life. Dinei Achakis. Without further ado, Rabbi Pesach Schmerling.
Good evening, welcome. I understand that the shir, because it's also available online and it's also going to be recorded, so it's not going to be only le'ezras anoshim, but also to ezras noshim. But on the sign it says that it's for men. So I'm going to be addressing be'ikr the men. I don't mind if some women listen in. I actually got already a grus in advance from somebody who thanked me for the shir in advance from the Ezras Noshim. Maybe she thanked me for that her husband has an opportunity to chaza the dinim. But the main target audience is obviously the younger light, the men. And as we're coming close to the Matan Torah, to Bnei Yisrael, to the men, you got to be a bit stricter in the way you talk. But it's going to be b'ofen klali. Some of the inyanim are obviously going to be a bit geared more to the anoshim take. The dinim of hachokis are very fundamental part of Taharas Hamishpacha. Stay a word that a lot of times the Rebbe pointed out, people wrote to the Rebbe, had problems, different fertility issues, so many times the Rebbe responded with Taharas Hamishpacha. Sometimes the Rebbe wrote to find out if the person keeps Taharas Hamishpacha. Sometimes the Rebbe just wrote Taharas Hamishpacha. And sometimes the Rebbe wrote Diuk b'Taharas Hamishpacha. It says if there was a couple that is a frum couple, and bepashtus they keep Taharas Hamishpacha, so then the understanding is that they keep Taharas Hamishpacha, but still Diuk b'Taharas Hamishpacha. Sometimes people are not so medayik, they're not so careful. The Rebbe also wrote that Hashikha Mitzuya, people forget. So it's important to review. But the Diuk b'Taharas Hamishpacha, now obviously Diuk b'Taharas Hamishpacha, when the Rebbe answered to someone, could mean any part of Taharas Hamishpacha. Maybe the woman wasn't so careful with chatzitze for tvila, or who knows what. And of course there are mistakes that some people make in Shiva Nekim. But a lot of times it actually did refer to the dinim of hachokis. I know of a few stories that I heard from people that Pashat, over time, sometimes, unfortunately, people become lax with the dinim of hachokis because they feel, we're not little kids, we don't, every little detail of the hachokis are so relevant. We're not going to be over. But it's not up to us. Some of the hachokis maybe we identify with more. We realize how they can be causing us some trouble if we would be over. And some of them we feel, that's already that something will develop from that. It doesn't matter. We are from a Yidden, and what Chazal were metaken, some things are from the Geonim, the Rishonim, but was the Ogepasken Shulchan Aruch obligates every from Yid to behave al pi halacha, al pi Shulchan Aruch. And we have to keep it. And that's the diuk b'Taharas Hamishpacha that the Rebbe was me'orer many times. It referred to the hachokis that you got to be medayik. And hashikha mitzuya, if the HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps and a wife gets pregnant, 9 months, if there's no complications, she's tahira, people forget the hachokis. So the end of the 8th month, the beginning of the 9th month would be the proper time. Pull out the sefer, whichever sefer you want to use, from the Sfarim HaMekubalim, and review the halachos together so that when it becomes relevant, when she gives birth, you shouldn't forget the dinim. Al derech hatzachus, we know that the halachos between husband and wife are stricter than other aroyes. We know that there is isur, the reise, negia shel chiba, kirva shel chiba, lesikrivu legalis erva, and that refers to chibuk v'nishuk, hugging, kissing, things that are more mamish leading lidei tashmish. So that's kirvas gili erva, and that's an isur deraise for other aroyes, and also benish leishtei. But the halachos the rabbanon, not passing things to each other, things like that, that's only between husband and wife. An ashes ish, another woman, you're allowed to pass her something, a bag of groceries or whatever it is. There's no problem, because you have an isu yichud with them. Husband and wife, there's no isu yichud, so instead we have the halachos. But the halachos have to be kept strictly. If somebody is becoming lax in the halachos, he should get a knas that he has to have an isu yichud. That's just a tzachos, no? But the halachos have to be kept strict. The halachos are meant to be a technical barrier between husband and wife. They're not intended to chas v'shalom create shalom bayis problems. So if somebody takes them to an extreme, which is not what Chazal intended, so then that's not Torah, that's not halacha. So if somebody thinks that because they're in halacha mode right now, so therefore he's not going to talk to his wife, or he's not going to eat supper with her together, so that's meshugas, that's not Torah, that's not halacha. You have to treat your wife with respect, and chayv adam lev isishtike gufa lachabda yeser migufa, even when she is a nida, you still treat her with normal decency, proper normal behavior. You talk to her normal, you say good morning and good night and please and thank you. I mean, Pashat, basic menschlichkeit applies also when she's a nida. I know that it goes without saying, but it's worth repeating, just for the odd one out there who might not understand this. There are people like that, and it has to be mentioned that this is not Torah, this is not halacha, but the halachos and the inyanim that the poskim discussed, that there's mokim lahachmir, so there are inyanim that one can be machmir within the framework of the halachos themselves, but not stam to come up with one's own halachos. So, of course, halachos, there can be a lot of questions. I think that the best way to do this is, I'm just going to cover the halachos, go through all the halachos. If there are questions afterwards, you can ask me some questions, but if you're going to stop by each detail and start analyzing, then we need a series of 10 shiurim, not one shiur. You cannot touch each other, even indirectly. Even touching through a beged is asur, and the poskim write you should be careful that your clothes and her clothes shouldn't touch each other. That is, let's say you sit next to each other, you walk next to each other, be careful. You don't need to walk apart, social distancing 6 feet, but be careful. Don't walk too close that you might come to touch each other. There are certain things that, is it okay to walk under an umbrella together? One of those big umbrellas. But it's problematic. There is no specific issur in that. However, these are things that you put yourself into a compromised situation. Likewise, reading out of a same sefer. Yeah, if you're just showing her something, a line, is okay, but you're going to sit down and learn a sikha from the same sefer, you're putting yourself into a compromised situation, and it should be avoided. You are allowed to touch her bgodim, her clothes, when they're not on her. You can take her dress to the cleaners, a shaila, on a kesem, on a pair of underwear, you take it to the Rav. It's okay that you touch her bgodim, but godim that she's wearing, while she's wearing them, you have to be careful not to touch. Also her blanket, if she's laying on the bed and she's covered by the blanket has a din of her beged as well. So if you want to put down something on the bed, you're allowed to put something down on her bed, but you can't touch her, of course, and you can't touch her blanket. So if she pulls her blanket to herself, you put, let's say, the baby or a magazine down on the mattress, that's fine. But you got to be careful about this nekuda. Even through blowing off some dirt or something, neshifa beruach, you blow something off her sleeve is also asur. You can tell her, she'll take it off herself. You're not allowed to smell her perfume. Of course, simplest, if the woman doesn't wear perfume and she's a nida. Some women, they need it. It's like part of like getting dressed, part of some basic makeup. If you can be easily masiach das from it, it's not like hitting you in the face. So, don't make an issue out of it. But if it's very overbearing, so you'll have to find a nice way, b'darkei ne'em, b'darkei shalom, how to ask her to tone it down a bit in the future. You're not allowed to see any mekemes mechusim begufa. That means body parts that others shouldn't see, are not allowed to see. You're not allowed to see either when she's a nida. The Taz on the Shulchan Aruch writes actually that the zehirus, being careful about this, not to see her body parts exposed during nida, also has to do with how your children will turn out. Havyon leibonim hagunim, chas v'shalom. If a person is not careful about that, it could have a bad effect on the children. We learn in Tanya how you behave during actual relations has an impact on the children. But the zehirus in al-chakis apparently is also, he brings from the Gemara that has an impact on how the children turn out. So you have to be careful about it. And sometimes it's something that nobody knows. Your wife is asleep, and mistam, you wake up early in the morning to learn Chassidus or Ira Shachar, and your wife is still sleeping. But good chances during the sleep, one leg is sticking out from under the blanket, half the tichel slipped off. She doesn't know, she's asleep. You have to have that Yira Shamayim within you. You don't look at her, because you're not allowed. It's pashut and isur for you to look. B'mkemes mechusim begufa. So her arms from the elbow and up, and her neck from the collarbone and down. These are mkemes mechusim begufa. Her feet barefoot, her heels, her feet. You're not allowed to look at her feet. Now, you have to be normal. The says, you have to understand that it's also for you to look at these body parts of hers. I'm going to get to the hair in a moment, that's also asur. Sar b'ishaer, we're not allowed to see her hair. But, Pashat, you got to be practical. Your wife gets up in the morning, and she washes negelwasser, she goes to the bathroom. She doesn't have to put on her socks, if she wants to. That's a beautiful hidur, and that's her calling. But a husband should tell his wife, no, you got to put on your socks under the blanket before you get out. You don't look at her feet. There's a difference between walking around the apartment or walking around the house for hours without stockings or without socks, which is problematic. It's warft in the eigen, it attracts the eye, and just getting up in the morning or getting ready for bed at night. So then we can tell the husband, just given the dosh, we're not that makbid on such things. So just don't look and don't gaze at her feet. I mean, that we can put the onus on the husband to be more careful about that. Sar b'isha erva, a woman's hair, you're not allowed to see your wife's hair when she's a nida. Now, even when she's tahira, a woman is really supposed to cover her hair at all times. And this is not just a zohar for mekubalim. This is something that is brought down in Magen Avraham and Shulchan Aruch. And therefore, this has become common practice by all Frumme Yidden, not only Chassidim. If it would be just a Zoyar, then some Chassidim would be careful about it. But Magen Avraham brings it. Everybody is careful about this. This is the common practice. A woman does not walk around the apartment with her hair exposed. Even if it's just her husband and she's Tahira, even if it's just her herself, she should keep her hair covered at all times. Actually, in Zohar, there are two places where this is discussed in Zohar, and in one place it talks about all the negative things that happen if a woman is not careful about that, and the Magen Avraham quotes that Zohar. But there's another Zohar that brings all the brachas, parnasa, and health for the husband and the children, the whole Hamishpacha, and the Rebbe quotes that Zohar with all the brachas. But it's an important thing. Having said that, there is a difference between the time that she's a nida and the time that she's tahira. When she's a nida, it's pashat asur for you to look at her hair. So if she changes from a tichel to a sheitel, from a sheitel to a tichel, you can't see her hair even for a moment like that. So either she does it when you're not around, or you turn around, or she goes to the bathroom, whatever it is. But when she's tahira, again, if a woman wants to be extra mahader, that's a great schus. I'm not going to say to be mekader her, but if she does it when she's tahira in the bedroom and the husband sees her, how she changes from a tichel to a sheitel, from a sheitel to a tichel, it's not as bad. We're not talking about walking around the apartment. It's for a split moment, it's fine. If anybody has further questions about this on the practical note, they should discuss it with the personal mashpia. This was just a maimar al musgar because we're talking about hachakis dafke bizman nidosa, but I couldn't just skip that because that's an important point, that a woman should always keep her hair covered even when she's tahira. When she's a nida, one has to be extra careful. Another nekuda connected to that, we know that the Rebbe made a big hadgosha point that outdoors, a woman goes in the street, in public, she should wear a sheitel and not a tichel. I assume that the Eilam knows about this. And the simple reason is because tichel, it slides a bit and a bit more, chas v'shalom, and here become exposed. So the Rebbe made the point that dafka sheitel and not a tichel. That doesn't mean that when the wife is a nida, she has to wear a sheitel in the house too all the time, because a tichel slides and somebody's going to make that cheshbon. A woman can wear a tichel. I'm teaching the men, not the women. The women should be mindful and careful. The husband, she hears the husband coming to the door, she should readjust her tichel ideally to make sure that it's covered properly. But you don't become like nitpicking on her. And if it slides off too much, and so you can gently motion to her a little remes to readjust the tichel. But it's not something to drive your wife crazy about the Tzemach Tzedek writes about some hair in front of the ear that is l'chatchila okay for the husband to see even b'mei nidah. So usually, anybody here, I assume that everybody here is married. So tichel, it slides a bit, some hair in the front, in the back. Don't stop becoming. Because if you're going to be too machmer on your wife and becoming her mashgiach tmidi 24/7, she's going to start telling you, Zasman Krishma, davening with a minion, benching with a jacket. She'll find reshimis of things that you are not perfect about. Good. You got to bring in some milsa de b'dichas here and there. To hear her sing is also a problem during Yemei Nida. So that is a problem. Playing an instrument, some poskim write about playing an instrument. Playing an instrument is not koil isha, of course, the etzem problem is not there. But they write that it depends how it's done. If through not only the woman, also the man. If one of the spouses play an instrument, so if they just practice, that's fine, they can do that. But if it's done specifically for the enjoyment of the other spouse, maybe the niggin that they like, it's done specifically for the purpose of the hana of the other, it's better not to do these kind of things. And that leads me to another nekuda, which is important to remember when we talk about achokes bichlal. There is the halachis, and then there is what is called in English the spirit of the law. There are certain things that are not, you can't find in Shulchan Aruch a specific issur on this or that, but things that are of romantic nature. I mean, there is a halach in Shulchan Aruch about not to behave frivolously and not to speak words, dvarim hamagilim lo erva, words, don't flirt with your wife when she's in need. So there is that idea in Shulchan Aruch also, but it's not only those things, it's anything of that romantic nature. If a couple knows that this is going to cause a kirva yesera, some extra romantic things, it shouldn't be done. It doesn't, it's a pastnish in the time of, the whole idea of harchak is that husband and wife, while they remain married and they still love each other, but it's a relationship of friendship, very good friendships, of course, but not the romance. The romance has to be kept for after she goes to mikveh. So, playing an instrument specifically for the enjoyment of the other can be a problematic type of gesture. Al derech the poskim talk about giving a matana. Can you buy your wife a gift? We're not talking about getting some flowers, like Kavod Shabbos or Shavuos coming up. As a bacher, maybe you didn't buy flowers for your dorm, but nevertheless, when you're married, you buy flowers. It's for the home, for the ambiance of the home, like Kavod Shabbos, like Kavod Yontiv. That's not a problem. It's okay. But if you're buying al derech, if you're on the way home from work, you stop by the bakery and you buy her a Danish that she likes, that's not called buying her a romantic matana. That's just, you do something nice for your wife. You're allowed to do nice things for your wife when she's in need. You know that your wife gets her period and she's having a hard time. She's not feeling well. She gets migraines or whatever. You come home. She tells you, keep harchakis, which is, by the way, a woman has to notify her husband when she becomes a nida. She can't delay that. I'll tell him soon. I'll tell him. Chas v'shalom, in the meantime, a michshel can happen. So at the first opportunity, she needs to notify you. She doesn't have to send you a text message in the middle of the day. She could. And sometimes it's a good idea because sometimes people, they don't remember 3 days later, did it start on Monday or on Tuesday or Wednesday? They can't recall. If they have a text message to go back to, it's a good idea. Less problems when is they have sektara and michshelim like that happen all the time. So it is a good idea, but mitzad halacha, she doesn't have to notify you like that. But when you come into the house, at that point, she doesn't need to notify you, because otherwise, maybe suddenly you'll do something, you'll touch her. So she has to notify you. So the husband knows his wife has a hard time. It's okay for him to tell her, go lay down, relax, I'll take care of the kids, I'll give them supper. It's okay to do these kind of things. That's not called being romantic. This is called being a mensch. And lo'olam yehei adam, a person should be a mensch, and certainly to his wife. V'havta lecha kamecha, the Ramban says, beinish leishta, it can be kamecha mamish. We know in Perek Lamed Beis, Alter Rebbe explains how it can be done for every yid, but it requires a certain type of avodah. But in pashtus hadvarim, so you got to be nice to your wife when she's in nida, but buying her some expensive gift, a piece of jewelry, or some other type of, not an ordinary little thing, something a bit a greater type of gift. So the poskim talk about it. Now there's no issur. There's Shulchan Aruch. There's no issur to give a gift to your wife, but some poskim do mention it that if it's not going to cause shalom bayis problems, it might be better to avoid. So if you forget your wife's birthday, you're going to be in trouble. But if you tell her, didn't forget your birthday, I ordered something, it's coming in a few days, and she's okay with that, then that would be perhaps better. But if she's makpid, then don't make shalom bayis problems. Get her that gift. Of course, you can't hand it to her, but you can give her the. So these are things that are the spirit of the law. That's why I'm mentioning this. Things that create a kirva yesera. Use your common sense and don't go there because of the problem that it creates. So you can't, the Lashon is la yischek v'la yakel reisha ima. So it doesn't mean that you have to become a fachmurete, marashcheredige misnagid. Chassidim seien freiliche. So you can be freilich also when your wife is in nida. You can be your regular self. There's a certain type of loose behavior. A person just goes on, joking around, one joke out, cracking up jokes, and all right, halt sich in the ramen, in Yiddish it's called. Keep yourself a bit contained. There is a certain level that is inappropriate when your wife is in nida, and certainly to talk, to outright flirt with your wife and start up with her, that is definitely inappropriate when she's in nida. I teach Chassanim. Chassanim, this whole Olam is as a Yaakov Eitz of Hamurim Beparshas, of the Beruchnis Inyanim. But younger light who already live, you understand, from a Bacher's perspective, to say good morning to his wife, he thinks about that. Wow, that he already thinks that that's Dvarim HaMagilim L'Erva, versteht sich. You're married for a couple of days, more than that, so you realize that not so fast. So I don't know exactly how to be Magdir. But the way I'm magdir it is like this. A statement that you can, in theory, tell another person, you can tell your wife too. Lamashal, thank you very much, the food was delicious. If you eat by somebody else, you can also tell them the same thing. So that's not dvarim hamagilim la'erva. Otherwise we would have a problem. You can only eat your wife's food, but you can't compliment her on it. I don't think that's right. So you can also compliment her. That's not a problem. Things like that are not a problem. I think that even a bit more than that, let's say your wife got a new dress. L'kavod yontif, which by the way, talking to husbands, chiyuv and shulchan aruch, to be mesamcha, l'kavod yontif, you should buy her something, or you don't have to actually go yourself and buy it. You can give her the money, or the credit card, whatever, and she should buy herself a dress, something l'kavod yontif. So she happens to be a nida. She puts on the new dress. Is it okay for the husband to tell her, the dress looks nice on you, traggesante, it is chachi, ich weiß. L'chayre, it's okay, because it's not dvarim hamagilim la'erva. If your daughter got a new dress, you can tell her also that it's a beautiful dress, traggesante. And if your friend got a new hat or a suit, you can tell him also. It's by definition, this is not considered dvarim hamagilim la'erva. It's just to give the person a good feeling. Gesundheit. Now, obviously, if a person is going to start getting into more explicit type of compliments and how it looks on her figure and this and that, and okay, that's inappropriate. Or all kinds of other flirting and romantic type of talk is inappropriate. And people ask me about texting. Texting also. You can't start texting romantic stuff to each other. That's inappropriate during nida time. Because besides for the problem of the interaction between husband and wife, in the Hilchos there's also a problem what it does to the individual, especially talking to men, that it causes hirhurim and machshavas zoros that can lead to other trouble. So, which is, by the way, we know that some of the Hilchos are stricter on the husband. The husband is not allowed to sit on his wife's bed when she's in nida. Even if she's not there, you cannot sit on her bed. She can sit on your bed, even in your presence, not if you're on the bed, but if you're in the room talking to her and she sits down on your bed, that's okay. If you're not in the room, she could even lay down on your bed. So we see that it's also in Shiraim, we're going to soon talk the details, where it's stricter on the husband. And it's not just that the husband is the more dangerous one in the equation. There is also another point in the Hilchos. The Hilchos are meant to keep a safe distance between husband and wife. They're also meant to prevent the husband from hirhurim machshavas zoros that can lead to other trouble that just doesn't exist by a woman. So if a husband and wife are texting each other romantic stuff when she's in nida, it will still cause him hirhurim machshavas. His wife is on the other side of the ocean, could be, but still it can cause in him all kinds of hirhurim machshavas zoros that can lead to trouble. So in the time of Hilchos, you have to be careful about these things. It's asur ladabrim odvarim hamagilim la'erva. I suggest to extend it also to texting, not only ladabir, but at the same time, that doesn't mean, again, you don't have to be extreme. You can be just normal. So again, obviously there's no kloli mamish about this, but things that you are comfortable with someone else. You send an emoji to someone else, you can send it to your wife too, that type of thing. But certain types of discussions and certain types of words that you wouldn't hopefully tell anybody else in the world, so you obviously cannot do that with your wife either when she's in need. You're not allowed to touch each other, which we already discussed, and even through clothing, and even indirectly. That means passing something to each other. Not only passing, even throwing things to each other is asur as well. Handling something together, it's not only the passing, it's handling something. To carry a table from one side of the room to the other side together, or spreading out a tablecloth on the table together. This is all falling under this isur. One is holding a bag and the other one puts something into the bag, takes something out of the bag. Pushing a carriage and the carriage rolls to the other one stops it. All these kind of things where either both or one feels like the energy, the koyach hazrika of the other, this is all part of this general isur. There is no isur for both of you to touch the same object. So both of you are sitting at the table, and both of you are touching the table while you're sitting at the table for supper. There's no problem with that. But handling something together is asur. An example for this difference is, this is brought down in the Achreinim, in the Melaktim. You have a child, a toddler, husband and wife are walking with the child. Each parent is holding one hand of the child. Is that okay? So it depends. If the child is walking properly, it's okay, as long as the parents don't pick up the child together and swing him and things like that. But just walking together like that is fine. It's fine until the child starts making a tantrum that he wants the parents to pick him up and swing him. Okay, but mitzad of walking together is not a problem. But if the child is learning how to walk, and every other step he slips and this, and the two parents keep on picking him up together, so then the two of you are handling him, then it's a problem. So touching the same thing is not a problem. Handling something together is a problem. This is something that is brought down in the Achreinim, that even if it's in a way that the definition of the Isra doesn't mamish apply, for example, if you throw an object into the air, and then it falls down, and the other one puts out the hand and it lands on the other's hand. This is not mamish part of the Isra because it's gravity pulling it down already. At that point, it's not anymore the energy of the one who threw it up. Or the same idea would also be, you hold, let's say, something, and you let go of it. You're not throwing it, you just let go of it. So it drops, but that's not your koyach. It says, hamachmer b'zeh tovel of bracha, it's better to be machmer in it. Just put it down, and the other one takes it. And that's it. People are sometimes nervous. What if people realize? And people realize we're Baal Chokah. So number one, people go about their business, and people have other things to do besides for keeping tabs of what you are doing and what's going on in your life. Sometimes people are just very self-conscious and they think everybody's watching them. People have other things to do. But even if somebody realizes, it's not the end of the world. So they realize that you're also keeping halacha. One thing is for sure, it's not a reason to be matir. The idea that in public, when there are other people around, maybe you don't need to keep the achakah so carefully or something like that, has absolutely no basis in halacha. This is not something that there is a machloikis haposkim about it. Everybody agrees that you need to keep the achakahs in public just like when you're alone, in private. This is a modern idea that some people with a whole lumdis decided that there could be maybe a reason why in public you don't need. That has no basis in halacha whatsoever. You need to keep the achakahs properly even when you're in public. Now obviously, hachochem reyes haneilad. You know your wife is a nida, don't put yourself into awkward positions, and then later, the achakahs was so awkward, everybody realized, you go shopping in the mall with your baby, put the baby in the carriage, don't just hold the baby, because at some point you're going to pass the baby to your wife, and you're going to be in an awkward position. In an awkward position, you still have to do what you have to do. Put the baby down on some chair, on some table, on the floor, whatever it is. You can't be makel because it's awkward. But lechatchila, use your seichel and don't put yourself into an awkward position. To touch something that the other one is touching, as we discussed, is okay. So both of you are touching the table. But if one parent is holding the child, for the other parent to play with the child or feed the child and things like that should not be done. It can lead to negia very easily, and it's a problem. You're not allowed to eat out of the same keli. Even if there are more people sitting at the table, there's a big bowl of popcorn in the center and everybody's just eating from that bowl, you and your wife cannot eat like that. Even if you're careful not to stick your hands into the bowl at the same time, it is still asur. What is okay, if you take a handful of popcorn and put it onto a napkin or onto a plate and eat from there. It's not good enough to just take a handful and then eat out of your hand. That's still considered direct. But if you put it down on some other keli, it doesn't have to be mamash a plate, it can be a napkin too, but then that is fine. The same issur applies also to spreads. You have some type of tuna salad, egg salad, you take a cracker and you give a little schmear and you stick it into your mouth, that's asur as well. That's also direct from the keli to your mouth. That's the definition of the issur. If you put it down, take some, schmear it on, or put it into your plate and then do your own thing in your plate, that, if you mamish, these halachas are, in a way, also just teaching you some yeah. If you miss that eating out of the same keli, so go to some fabrengen and then do with your chaverim whatever you need to do. But with your wife, you can't do that when she's a nida. A very classical example for that is sushi. So after you figure out what bracha you make on the sushi, so eating out of the same sushi platter would be a problem as well. Now, many people realize that, so they take a few pieces of sushi, they put it into their plate. But then what they do, they take the same piece from their plate and they dip it in the same dip and they keep on dipping in the same dip. That's also asur, okay? So you have to take some of the dip to your plate too. Or take 2 dips or whatever, but you can't dip in the same dip. This is the same issur of achila mikaira achas. Talking about achila mikaira achas, so at least one of you is not allowed to eat from the same bowl. So in concept, if one of you is taking it out of the bowl and the other one is eating from the bowl, it would be okay, but it's better if both, especially we're talking now about shiraim, I'm going to start now about shiraim. It's also by shiraim, if you transfer to a different keli, is not a problem. But still, when it's not shiraim, the other one is not finished, they're still eating, and you keep on taking from their plate, this is really a shtickle problem. It's not really so appropriate. So it's better, ideally, that both of you are going to take out from the central bowl and put it onto another keli before you eat. But it would be okay, technically, if only one of you would do that. Especially if the husband is eating together, let's say, especially when there are other people around, from the central bowl, and the wife takes out some and puts it onto a plate, would be okay. But let's talk about shiraim take. Shiraim is an issur that applies only to the husband. The husband is not allowed to eat and drink his wife's leftovers. There are certain ways how he is allowed to do that, and I'm going to explain that now. The wife is allowed to eat and drink her husband's leftovers. The whole issur of shiraim doesn't apply to the wife. But that's only if it's his shiraim. So if he's in the middle of eating, she can't take a bite out of his plate. Because although she's allowed to eat his shiraim, but she's not allowed to eat out of the same keli. Achila mikaira achas is still forbidden. So if he's done eating, she can eat his leftovers from his plate, no problem. The husband is allowed to eat and drink his wife's leftovers in the following scenarios. If you pour the drink from her cup into another cup. Once you pour it out of her cup, it loses the status of being her shiraim. Even if you pour it back into her cup, it doesn't regain the status of her shiraim. So it would be mutter. But once you pour it out, it's fine. If she drank the entire cup and you just want to use her cup for a refill. So in the Beis Yosef, it says that hamachmir lishteif tovel of bracha. It's better if you can rinse out the cup before you use her cup for a refill. In the Shulchan Aruch, he doesn't write that. The Bar Heitev brings it in the Shulchan Aruch as well. So, of course, it's a chumrah. It's better if you could, but it's important to understand that al pi halacha, it's not a chiyuv. So if you are at home and you're in the kitchen and you want to use her glass for a drink, so just walk over to the sink and just rinse it out for a moment. It's a chumrah. The Beis Yosef writes, hamachmir tovel of bracha, adrabah. But if you're traveling somewhere and you have only one cup in the car and you want to use the cup that she drank from it earlier on, so that's okay. But the lashon is that if she drank the entire cup, it's okay. In other words, we're not makpid on little drops that might have been left in the cup. But if she drank half a cup, for you to just add on some more drink, like letaken hapogum, that doesn't work. That's not good enough, because then you still drinking mamish shiraim of her shiraim. If someone else drank from it after she drank from it, let's say one of your kids, and then you drink from it, that's okay. Because once somebody else drank from it after her, it's now the shiraim of that person, and not of your wife anymore. So that's fine as well. And another point that is brought down in the poskim is if she's not around. She left the room. So then it's also okay. The same applies to food also. I use the terms of drinking and cups. The same is by food. Foods is like that. If there are foods that she b'chlal didn't touch, it's not really considered her shiraim. So if she has in her plate a piece of chicken and a piece of kugel, she ate from the chicken, but she didn't like the kugel. She left the kugel. She didn't touch it. So although it was in the plate, it doesn't have the din of her shiraim. So in Indian, you can eat it. You can also transfer it to your plate, l'rafcha de milsa, but be'etzem, this is not considered her shiraim. So going back to the point of achila mikayra achas, let's talk about this on a practical note. A husband and wife traveling somewhere together. We're going to talk about traveling soon in its own right. But you drive somewhere together, and you have a bag of chips and a can of soda in the car. You don't have any cups. You don't have any plates. Both of you would like to have some of the chips and some of the soda. So the way to do it is very simple. The husband should eat first, have half a bag of chips, half a can of soda, and then the wife can have his leftovers, and that's fine. So you can't go back and forth. You take a sip, she takes a sip, and back and forth. That would be achilo mikayra achas, would be osur. For her to eat or drink first, and then him, is a problem of shiraim that you're not allowed to. But if you eat and drink first, then we're not saying this is achilo mikayra achas. Then we say this is his, and he ate from it, he drank from it, he left over shiraim, she can have the rest. And that's fine. Yeah. If she ate and drank from it first, and then you want, what are you going to do? So you pull over on the side of the road, you tell her to take a walk around the block, and shnat before now. No, don't do that. I see the Elam is a little bit, as they're getting too depressed hearing all the halachas. You got to bring a little milsa de b'dichas. All right. Mealtime creates a kirva yesera between the mesubim, and you need a heker on the table when the two of you are eating together. If both of you are on the same table, if one of you is sitting at the kitchen table and one is sitting at the kitchen counter, you don't need a heker. You're not in the same place. But if you're at the same table, you need a heker put down between the two of you. The heker needs to be beineihem, in the general area between them. It doesn't have to be exactly in the middle between the two plates, but it has to be in the general area between them. So if the husband is sitting here and his wife is sitting on his right side, he can't put down the heker on the left of his plate. That's not beineihem. But beineihem can be either taka between their plates. It could also be a little bit in front of their two plates, like in the middle, in the general area between them. What is considered a heker? There are a few options that you can choose from what is considered a heker. One type of heker is a food item which will not be eaten during that meal. A food item should be something. A kikar lechem is brought down. A loaf of bread. It doesn't have to be dafka a loaf of bread. It can be a bagel, a roll. But it has to be a davar nikar, a davar shalem, a davar mamoshi, a rice kernel won't do. That's not the meichel shen eichel beises suda. It's not significant enough. It's a vavtich nish in the eigen. You don't see it. You might see it, but it's not as obvious, and that's a problem. It has to be a davar gadol, a davar nikar. It can be food which is bichlal not eaten during that meal. You know, just take something from your pantry closet, I don't know, a can of corn or a bag of rice, and just put it down on the table. But it can also be something that you are eating that type of food at the meal. L'mashal, you make hamoitzi, lechem mishne, you have two challahs, and one challah you're going to eat, the other one you're not going to open up. You know for sure, if there is a svara, we're going to finish the first one, we'll probably end up opening up the second, and don't rely on that as a heker to begin with. But if you know that there's no way we're going to end up opening up the second one, or you need a second one for tomorrow's shlechem mishnah, whatever it is, and you leave it on the table. Some have the minhag to leave the second challah on the table for other reasons always, but that's a separate shmuz. But mitzad the concept, you have a full challah that you're not going to eat. So hagam, you are eating challah during this meal, but that one you're not eating, it works. It's a proper heker. It's a good heker. The other option is not food, but an object. An object has to be gavoy yaktsas, has to be raised off the table. So you can't have a pen or a ring or a key that's flat on the table. And it has to be an object that's a little bit raised. I'll talk about that in a moment. And she'ein dar keliyas ala shulchan b'mei taharos. During Tahara days, that object would not be on the table. Now, if you use that as a heker, it's okay even if you are using it in the course of the meal. Let's say, for example, you have a becher for kiddush that you only use when your wife is in need. You have more than one becher. And the one that has a design, a different design than the other one, you use only when she's in nida. So that's a good heker, even if you use it in the course of the meal. Or if you have a designated napkin holder or a designated pitcher that b'yemei tahara, you're careful, you never use it b'yemei tahara. Only b'yemei nida you use it. So it's a good heker, even if you use it in the course of the meal. So this is a bit different than the food. I mean, it's also understandable why. By the food, if you're going to eat it, so then how's it a heker? This is the food you're eating by this meal. It's not a heker, it's your food that you're eating. By the object, even if you use the object in the course of the meal, but if it's an object that b'yemei tahara you're b'chlal not using, so then the very metzias of the object screams out, I am the heker. Even if you use it, it's still, its presence tells you I am the heker, so that's fine. It has to be gavoy yaktsas. It doesn't say exactly what kind of height, how much does it have to be raised off the table, but because the examples in Shulchan Aruch are like in the poskim, the kikar lechem, koises, shtia, kayetzu, so it's like the height of a loaf of bread, the height of a cup, so not a little shot glass, a mashke glazel, an average cup. There's no midah mesuyemes. You understand yourself. Gavoy yaktsas. Another option for heker is if you're eating on separate surfaces. You're not on the same surface. If you have individual placemats, or one eats on the table and one on the tablecloth, or one takes the tablecloth and folds it onto the table and he eats on that second piece of the tablecloth, and the other one doesn't, eats just on the tablecloth direct, you're not on the same surface. Or one puts a napkin under their plate, and again, they're not on the same surface. That would work as a hecker unless they eat in this manner also when she's tahira. If they do that when she's tahira as well, like individual placemats, some people use it at all times. Sometimes that's the setting, how they set the table. They want to do a fancy supper. That's how they set it. Everybody gets their own placemats. So people ask a lot of times, that's why I'm addressing this, can we use different placemats? Like a different color placemats? So by the object, we said that if it's a different shape, a different color, pitcher, napkin holder, salt shaker, whatever it is, that would work as a hecker. But for this, it doesn't really work. And the reason is simple, because when we're talking about the object, it's raised off the table. So if it's a different shape or color, you see that all the time. But a placemat, you put down the plate and the cutlery and everything goes on it. The fact that it's a different type is not as boilet. Sitting at a different location at the table. And normally she sits on the right side, now on the left side, and things like that. While there is a mocker in the poskim that would work, but other poskim disagree, and in the Piskei Dinim it says not to do it. It's not from the Tzemach Tzedek, but it's a Chassidische Rav that was good enough of a Rav that his psakim should be included in the Sefer Piskei Dinim Tzemach Tzedek. I guess it's good, not everything, but for this definitely we can rely that one should be machmir not to consider that a good enough hecker. However, talking about changing location, if you're changing the location of an object on the table from its normal location to beneihem, that would be a good hecker. So Lamashal, if let's say you always have a vase with flowers on the center of the table, and now you take it from the center and you pull it to beneihem, to between the two of you. That would work as a hecker. And there's also another type of hecker, that if you have a vase and it's always beneihem, but it's a different vase, you have a different one that you only use when she's a nida. So then we're back to the object, shein darkalis ala shulchan taharas. That would be a good hecker too. And it could be there the entire 2 weeks. Like say the whole time that your wife is a nida, you sit on the opposite side of the table, and in the center there's a vase. It sits there the entire Yemei Nidosa. You don't put it down by every meal. It's still okay. If it's a unique vase that you don't use, you have to remember, your wife goes to mikveh, it's time to change the vase. But that would work. That is a good hecker. It's not a hecker to remove an object from the table. Meaning, you always have a vase on the table, but when she's a nida, you take the vase off the table. That's not good. The header, the lack of an object, is not considered a hecker. Serving each other, pouring drinks for each other, putting food into each other's plates. So it's like this. You're not allowed to pour a drink for the other. The husband is not allowed to do this for his wife. The wife is not allowed to do this for the husband. When the cup is in front of the other. And same thing is with food. To put food into the other's plate while the plate is in front of the other, you're not allowed to do that. Preparing a plate with food on the side somewhere, in the kitchen, by the counter, that's okay. But then, and same thing with a drink, but then serving it, you would have a problem again. So serving it, you can do for each other, but you need to put it down with a shinui, in a different manner than normal. So if you're a righty, you put it down with the left hand. If you're a lefty, you put it down with the right hand. Or you put it down in front of the other, but not direct in front of the other. A little bit off, so the other one has to pull it slightly to themselves. That's a shinui, and that is okay. The need to place something down with a shinui, and this is for both, the husband to the wife to the husband, but this requirement for placing down with a shinui applies only to a personal plate or cup, something like that. A platter, just a serving platter, you can put down in front of each other without a shinui, because you're not eating from the platter. You're going to take from the platter and put it into your plate first. So because it requires another step, that's why it is okay. There is an additional isur which doesn't apply to the wife, it's only on the husband. That's called shigur hakois. Shigur hakois means to instruct someone else, can you pass this cup to my wife? This is asur. You're not allowed to do this both verbally or by indication. You can't be merames to someone, pass this to my wife. That's the same isur. But this is limited, A, to a drink, B, to a drink that is chashuv, not water. Water you're allowed to, but any other drink, not only wine or fancy, any other drink but water, you're not allowed to. And in a cup. A bottle of a drink, you're allowed to ask someone, can you pass the bottle to my wife? That's fine. Food, you're also allowed to ask someone, can you pass this to my wife? Even individual food, not just a platter. You have a slice of challah or something, you can ask someone, can you pass this to my wife? But a cup with a drink, except for water, that is the issur of shigur hakois. The wife is allowed to ask someone, can you pass this cup to my husband? But the wife is not allowed to instruct, the husband is not allowed to instruct someone. And this hachak is actually stricter than the ones before, that if you forgot and you did tell someone, can you pass this cup to my wife, she's not allowed to drink it. If by mistake somebody served the husband, the wife, or the wife, the husband, a plate, and they put it down in front of the other without a shinui, next time you'll be more careful and not do that, but you could eat the food. It's not like asur. But shigur hakois actually asers it for the wife. It doesn't help. Go out of the room, it doesn't help. She's not allowed to drink it. It's a stricter halakha in that sense. It's a special derech, chiba bekach, whatever. Part of this is also to instruct someone to pour a drink for your wife. You shouldn't do that either. So if you go to a restaurant, you can order the food for your wife, but the drink is probably better if she orders herself. I mean, it depends what kind of restaurant. Our restaurants, they're going to just bring a bottle and a glass and plop it down in front of you. And I'm talking a nicer restaurant. When you order a drink for your wife, that means you are telling the waiter to bring it and pour it, and he's going to pour it for your wife. So that is part of this problem as well. If you're not meyached a kois, you just, many people have this now, that you make kiddush, and then you pour into a few small cups on a tray, and then you just pass down the tray. Now, yes, they're going to take the tray to your wife first, but you didn't send her a specific cup. She's going to pick one of the cups and take it for herself. So that is okay, that you can be makel on. The wife is allowed to ask someone, can you get me my husband's becher, let's say by kiddush. She can also stand by kiddush near you, and you just put the becher back down, and she takes it herself. And that's fine as well. You can even put it down if it's not mamish befonel, like we said before, b'shinu, you put it down a bit off, or with your left hand for her, that's also fine. That's an interesting point. You yourself can put it down with a shinui for your wife, but you can't tell someone else, pass it to my wife. Because there's a derech chibo bekach, and that's the definition of this isur. You can't sleep in the same bed. Of course, we have covered a whole bunch of things. That obviously is one of the strictest hachakis. You can't sleep in the same bed, even if it's a huge bed and you're fully dressed, you don't touch each other. More than that, even separate beds, but the beds touch each other, is forbidden as well. There has to be a gap between the beds. How far does this gap have to be? So it doesn't say clearly in Shulchan Aruch, but the poskim write that you should have at least 1 amma between the beds. Brought down b'Shem Arizal, and other poskim also earlier, that you should make sure at least 1 amma between the beds. What is the gap filled with? In Shulchan Aruch, doesn't say. So you can have just an empty gap, that's fine. But Minhag Yisrael This is, the Rabbi also mentions this in the Maine, that it's mefursa minak bnei Yisrael yirei shamayim, that the two beds have to be separated by a night table or the like. A night table, a chair, or something like that. So in your home, usually people set it up that way, that they have a night table between the beds. If you go someplace, you're a guest in someone's house, they give you up as a small room somewhere in the basement, you got to make sure that there's the space. But if there's no night table, pull over something, a chair, put down your suitcase in between the beds, do something like that. It's not me'akiv, it's not halacha, but minig bnei Yisrael yirei shamayim. The Rabbi writes to have two separate beds, separated by a night table or the like, regardless what exactly this minor was about, but the point is definitely there that we have a night table between the beds. I already mentioned before, you can't sit on her bed. You are allowed to touch her bed, make her bed in certain ways. We're going to discuss soon Hatzah Samito. If she is in the bed, you have to be mindful, like we discussed before. She's allowed to sit on your bed. If there is a bed that is used by both, like a couch or a day bed, and sometimes he falls asleep on it, sometimes she falls asleep on it, that's not the issue. It's not considered her bed, basically. That's why it's not a problem. But something that is her bed, you're not allowed to sit on her bed. You can't sit together on a safsal misnadneid, a bench that rocks, moves, that you feel each other's movements. It doesn't have to be a swing necessarily. Any bench, probably not going to end up sitting on a 770 bench with your wife, but that would be a classical example of a safsal misnadneid. By the oil, when you go to the oil in the first tent, those benches are not safsal misnadneid. They're very sturdy, strong benches. So you have to know. A couch, if it's a proper couch, a sturdy couch, a big couch, you sit on one end, she sits at the other end. Usually it's not a safsal misnadneid. Try it out when she's tahira. Although you might feel when one is sitting and then the other one sits down at the other end, so you might feel like it gives a little shift. That doesn't yet make it into a safsal misnadneid. That's how Farkash writes it in a sefer. He brings up a raya from the Gemara about this. So that is not what defines it. It's considered a safsal misnadneid if throughout the time that you're sitting on that bench, every time one of you moves, the other one feels that movement. That would be a safsal misnadneid. In a car, today's cars, usually it's not a problem. In the front, it's two separate seats. In the back, it's one seat, but it's very sturdy, strong seats. It's not like in the old cars. If you remember the old yellow cabs, it was like a very, very jumpy type of seat. So that would be a problem. But today's cars usually don't have the problem. You sit at opposite ends. It's not an issue. And again, it's the same idea. You sit in the car, and then she gets in, or she sits in the car and you get in. You feel a little movement from just getting into the car, but that's okay. We're not makbid on that. And later on, you don't feel each other's movement unless you start dancing and jumping around there. It's not going to be an issue. There are poskim who say that if there is another person sitting between you and your wife, it would be okay even on a safsal misnadneid. I wouldn't normally rely on that. Other poskim strongly disagree with that. B'shas tchak godel, if there is something, maybe there's something to consider, but it's not like you have to sit on the same bench. Just sit on another chair. Especially if it's a zman memushach and things like that. You go to someone's sukkah and they put you and your wife on some bench in the sukkah. You're not going to be able to sit through a sudas yontif on the same bench. You move, the whole bench moves. You stand up, you sit down, you move around. Sometimes you have to sich abschämen and quietly walk over to the host and is it okay maybe if we can have a different seating arrangement? It's not the end of the world. They also live it. They also know it. And if you are the host, be mindful of it. You're hosting guests. You have couples. Use your seichel. You don't want to put them into an uncomfortable situation. Lechatchila. Okay. Talking about a car and a bench. So going for a drive, for a ride together, there's an isur tiyul. So the definition, lechatchila, isur tiyul is only in a vehicle. If it's a boat or a wagon, a car. The classical example for the isur tiyul would be, I've never done it, but heard about it, Central Park. You can rent a horse and buggy and take a stroll around the park. That would be a classical example. The purpose is the ride. That is the definition of the isur. Or going for a boat ride together. Just to enjoy a ride. That would be asur. It is mutter to go for a ride where the purpose is not the ride. You want to get to a certain place. You want to go to a store, so you get into the car together, you drive to the store. Even if it's a longer drive, you heard there's some outlet mall in Connecticut, and you drive there, then you want to buy some clothing. It's okay, because the purpose is not the ride. If the purpose is not the ride, but part of the ride, then it's asur. So, l'mashal, to drive through a safari, the purpose is to see the animals, etc., but it's still asur, because the purpose is being fulfilled agav nesiya, as part of the ride. It's asur. Or you have different cities have like these sightseeing buses for tourists. It goes around the town showing you the different landmarks. It's asur. Although the purpose is to see the landmarks, but it is part of the ride, and it's asur. Now, the fact that there are another 50 tourists on that bus doesn't mean that therefore it's mutter. It's still you and your wife are enjoying this ride together, and it's still asur. One can, b'shas hadchak, consider a tzad heter in a scenario where it's take boiled that you're not enjoying this ride with your wife. L'mashal, I usually tell this to the chasanim because it's more common for younger light, shana rishayna, shana shniya, but it could also happen later on in life. You go to the parents or to the in-laws for yontif. One day, the whole mishpacha, everybody's going on a boat ride somewhere. So it's not you and your wife going. So obviously, if you get onto that boat and the whole family is sitting on that side of and you and your wife are huddling together on the other side of the boat, enjoying your own privacy, then that's certainly asur. But if it's take, you spend time with your brothers or brother-in-laws and whatever, and then she is hanging out with the girls, you're not mamish together. Like, if you are picking a chalamoid trip for your own kids, maybe do something else on chalamoid. There are some other ideas out there. You don't have to dafke do that as a trip. But if you're together with the mishpacha and yesh makom lahakol, there are some poskim who say that in that scenario where it's not you and your wife, it's taket with other people and clearly defined as such, yesh makom lahakol beis hatzerich. Of course, even if it's ba'ifn hamuter, you need to make sure that it's not a safsal misnadneid. I don't know what kind of trips. I come from Switzerland. If you go on a chairlift, you and your wife can't go on a chairlift together. That's a classical safsal misnadneid. Yes?
Fishing.
Both of you going fishing together? In the boat? So that would be a problem. As I said, that even if the purpose is something else, but it's being fulfilled as part of the ride, is a problem, like driving through a safari. But you can pull over somewhere and then fish from the side of the river or a lake or whatever it is. Don't want to make jokes because we're talking halacha, you got to be careful. It depends if you catch any fish or not. But that was just a joke. Going for a walk together, for a stroll, just taking a walk, that is mutter. The isur tiyul is in a vehicle. However, the poskim do discuss about taking a walk in a romantic setting would be problematic. So here in Crown Heights, I would say Prospect Park is not a problem because there are people driving by in scooters and motorcycles and walking their dogs and whatever else happens then. And maybe Botanical Garden might be a little bit more of a romantic setting. You go there, you see a lot of couples strolling together. So that might be, so it's not clear cut. These are the kind of things. Yesh makom la'achmir, the poskim talk about it. They talk about ganes upardesim, excluded areas, going some special, beautiful, romantic setting. So these are things that even though they might not fall squarely into the definition of the Isur, but again, it's a pastnish in the time of Nida to do romantic things like that together. There is the Isur of Hatzoas Hamito, making the bed for each other. Changing the mattress cover, the pillowcases, the blanket covers, that you can do for each other's beds. But the Isur is to make the bed nice looking, inviting looking, opening up half a blanket, fluffing up the pillow, straightening it out. That is the Isur of Hatzas Hamito. Now even that is Asur only in the presence of the other. So when the other one is not present, you're allowed to do this for each other's beds as well. Rav Farkash in his Sefer explains also that the definition of the Isur is in preparation for going to sleep. Likras hasheno. So in the evening, that would be a problem. But making the bed neat in the morning, that's just to organize the room, is not really falling under that Isur. One thing is for sure, you're allowed to make your own bed anytime. One of my chasanim that I taught once told me, but hamachmer tovel of bracha maybe, but good. Probably those few that learned by me heard these jokes from me already. Okay. Schlafen kemen. Pouring water for each other, the Litzik Mayim for the other one to wash. Baruch Hashem, we have running water still. So, we don't usually have this issue of one standing and pouring water and the other one washes their hands or their feet or their face. But there's also the issue of placing a bucket with water down in front of the other to soak their feet or something like that. That would be asur as well. Or to start a bath, filling up a bath in the presence of the other would be a problem. It's not a problem if the other one is not there. You prepare it in advance, and then it sits there. So even though the other one knows that you prepared it for her, or she knows, you know that she prepared it for you, it's still fine. But in the presence of the other, to bring the water or to prepare the water in front of the other for washing purposes is forbidden. Negelwasser is not a problem. Negelwasser is an atila shel mitzvah, another rechitza shel tainug. Also, especially if you have a bucket with two quarts in it, and it's not like which one is his and hers. If it's more unique for her, but even then, it's not mamish part of this isur. There are other halachas that I don't think is needed to cover over here. That's if either the husband or the wife are chas v'shalom ill or ilenu, it shouldn't be negea to anyone lemaise. And basically, if one pashat needs physical assistance, getting in and out of bed, getting dressed and stuff like that, Eibusha should help. This should not be negea lemaise ever. If somebody has an issue like that, best is consult the Rav, what is okay, what isn't okay, and so on, because the details of the situation can make a difference with these things. The Eibusha should help that we should soon, Bekarev Mamish, not have any more harchakis, that right now in Golus we are lenida hayasa, we are harchakis from the Eibusha. The Arizal says that when the Gea Safsal Misnadnit that was discussed before, that husband and wife, HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Knesset Yisrael, can't sit on the same safsal. We can't be together in the time of Golus. But if you have a safsal kavua, then it's okay. So that's why it's important by davening to have a mokim kavua, says the Arizal. So then the Eibusher, during davening, you can be beis achdus with the Eibusher. So it should be not only during davening, but we should be smuchim al shulchan avinu, bekarev mamish, begula mitzvah shleima.
Yeshakayach Rabbi Schmerling. I think For more than one reason, we're lucky to learn Hachakis from an Europäischer. Being in America, we got very used to being very casual. And Hachakis take us back a little bit. So we mezetzach by Asuda, Makom Shaloi, Makom Shalah, have different plates, and how to greet each other, and how not to greet each other. And another very important nekuda that we learn from Hachakis is that Bizman Heyesa Tahira, so there is supposed to be a Gilu Cheba, and there's supposed to be a connection and expressed by every time you sit down. That's also in Europa as given Anders. They sit down, they hear who's going to be. Shaitan Yerushalayim didn't sit down by a Suda till they knew who's going to be there. And that's already part of the next year. So this is a segue into remembering Bezos Hashem next week. There's going to be a shir on the Zman Heyesa Tahira, on Hashkafa and Shalom Bayis. Be there next Wednesday, 8 o'clock, by yours truly. Rabbi, grace and shekayach. Good night.